Okay, morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Okay, so let's start with today's seminar. Just a couple of notes before we started. So, as always, these meetings are recorded. You can find the links for them on YouTube, and it will be also posted on edX. We'll just quickly cover what you're going to be doing for the next fortnight. Just some housekeeping notes. If you haven't received a response to your emails, please let us know. And it's been a busy time for us. If we don't get back to you within 2 days, just please forward your email again. And if you want one of the specific faculty advisors to see your email, if there was a specific area you had a question, please put their name in the subject line so the right person would see it. And by now, we hope that you've had a name for your device and solution, and you're on the final stages of submitting the video presentation assignment that's coming up soon. So, congratulations, congrats on submitting the Canvanizer. We had a chance to review a few of them. Most did a very good job on it, and Canvanizer is really going to help you, especially at the end of the project when you're writing the final report. So we do recommend going back and adding to it as you do further research and you're looking to more information or implementing your idea. So we do recommend going back to that. And make sure you're taking advantages of the teams and the other people in the project. We have interesting projects going on, and they do overlap in some bits and pieces, so it's going to help to collaborate on some of those aspects.
Just make sure you've got a result for your Canvanizer too.
Yeah. I did a double check all of the submissions. There were a few that didn't have marks, but they hadn't submitted. So,
well, if you could just let us know if you haven't received a mark, and we'll chase that up for
you. So by now, I would have hope you would have watched the business funding and planning videos that explore business planning framework and the basic principles of finance, financing and funding your business. And we're going to cover the next assignment, which is the market research and costing plan, and some of the important aspects of it. So here's a more breakdown of the important bits and pieces of that assignment that you're going to be submitting. It's going to be 15% of your overall marks. So the purpose of this plan is to consolidate your idea. And the key decision that you need to make before completing this plan is determining your business structure, determining what's the demand for your project, for your product or services that you're thinking of for this course. And we also want to know how in the industry and the environment in which your business would be implemented. And of course, internet research is a key and important bit of this research. You want to search for the keywords, you want to search for patterns. After I've gone through the lectures, these slides, I'll go back and show you these two. There's IP Australia and patents.google.com. These are two good places to go and look for a particular patent, find competitors, because I saw a couple of submissions that for your Canvanizer they didn't have a competitor field. Just it's going to be a very rare situation where you come up with an idea that is completely new. In most cases, some form of it would have probably been implemented. So it's good to kind of widen your research a little bit to see what you can write for those specific sections.
Yeah, I'll just throw something else in there too. When you're looking at the patents and copyrights and all that sort of thing, it actually can give you some very good ideas for your own device. So you might see a patent that does something a particular way that is useful towards what you're developing, but you may see fault in it. So you can actually do something different based on what they've done and give you better direction in providing a better solution. Or in some cases, it's actually worthwhile investigating further and approach the patent holder and just license what they're doing. So if something was a very time-consuming, expensive process to develop, it can actually be more beneficial just to license from somebody else and not reinvent the wheel. Not always the case, but sometimes can be the case.
So, continuing on that, thank you. Continuing on that, in your industry analysis, these are the main kind of areas that you should cover. So, in terms of political industry analysis, any political legal factors that may affect your business, is your industry highly regulated or is it under government radar? What impacts does the regulation have on the industry and on the success of your product, and what are the overall political stability? Economic factors. What are some of the economic factors that might affect your specific business? Exchange rate, inflations, interest rates, access to capital, availability of laborers, and that sort of stuff. Social, which is something that some people might overlook in these sorts of IoT projects, and the implications of that on the culture, how the device is going to be used, and also the population growth, demographics, health, travel, and different social elements that can affect the social aspects of the of your analysis. Technology. What are the advancements and developments of these technologies? I'll give you an example. Last year, we had an interesting project about a small pill you would swallow, and it would monitor the internals of your digestive system. It was a very interesting idea, but the idea was based on a very, very new thing. I think research by MIT, if I'm not mistaken. Do you remember, Ian, what the research was?
Yep.
Based on? And then just mute my phone. So you have to look to see what sort of technology is available to you, and of course the actual industry that you're going to be implementing the idea. Is it the health industry? Is it more of a public service, or a particular industry related project? And you also want to do a very extensive competitor analysis, and this gives you the advantage of understanding what the other companies can do, what are their weaknesses, what are their strengths. So what new thing your idea can provide. It could be as simple as making something more available. It could be the difference between the cost and the costing and the price that you have for the product, whether it's a different business model, it's a subscription-based model rather than just a one-off payment. So it's gonna, and especially going through those different competitors and understanding how they're presenting their ideas, how they're selling their products, how they're selling their services, is going to be a very good advantage for you to understand the market, understand what target audience they have, and help you iron out the details of your idea. And this is a very interesting example for some pricing strategies you could have. So as I said again, whether you're going to make your product or service as a subscription-based product, or is it going to be something you buy, you don't have to think about it anymore. And there are in different cases, different kind of strategies might be useful. And these pricing strategies and the market and the way people consume information has been changing recently. Let's say, I think a good example of that would be the way we would have consumed entertainment and movies, and traditionally by going to the theater or buying the DVDs and Bluetooth, and DVDs and Blu-rays. But now with the events of Netflix and Hulu and these sort of services, the idea of purchasing is becoming pretty obsolete these days, unless you want to collect physical media. So the same kind of analogy can fit in with the different products, and say with the cloud servicing and cloud storage platform, you can include with your ideas, and the subscription modules you can include for bits and pieces of your services, and how much of it you can offer as an introductory kind of price to get the customers in, and then later on we give them more features based on their subscription. Anything you wanted to add here, Ian?
Yeah, there's a couple of things to bear in mind when you're working out the pricing strategy. We sort of touched on this before. One is the amount that you want to recoup from your development time. If it's a fully commercial where you've hired engineers and hired office space to do the developments, then you will need to recoup that money and add that into your pricing. We did touch on that in our last session. There's also we can look at the two extremes of pricing. The first one is where you're doing it as a service for the good of humanity or just for fun, where you cover your costs and that little bit extra to cover maintenance and returns and your distribution, further development, and at a minimal profit on there to cover those sort of things. The mid-range way, which most people think of, is this is going to cost me X to develop, Y to build the device, and Z to distribute it or a small profit. And from all of those costs, you just add a percentage on top to make your profit. That's a very simple thing, and it works reasonably well in a normal market, not an overly competitive and not a unique market. When you're looking at the competitiveness of a market, and this is where things really where the competitiveness really becomes important. If it is a highly competitive market, you've got to look at either what are we doing in our product that is absolutely unique, would mean that people will buy it over our competitors. And if you have those features, extra features that are useful, then you can price it above your competitors. If you can't compete purely on features, like it's doing exactly the same job, then you would have to reduce your profit margin so that you price under your competitors. If you're in a very lucky situation where you don't have a great deal of competition, and this is a purely commercial project, it pays you to increase your profit margin in the short to medium term to maximize your profits, so that when competitors do come in, and they will come in if you've got a successful product, you've already recouped enough money to cover your costs. You've recouped enough money to aid in further development and come up with your next product or your next version of the same product, while you don't have that competition. So if something was costing you $10 rather than just adding a 30% margin on it and selling it for $13, if there's nothing else in the market, or your next nearest competitor is selling at $100, you don't go and sell it at $13, you sell it at $95. So you're still undercutting your competition, but you're maximizing your profit so that when they drop their price, you can come in under them and you've already recouped the money. So look at the long-term pricing strategy, base your price, if possible, on the competitor analysis. If you're doing this for a purely commercial reason, maximize your profits. Excuse me. Maximize your profits when comparing to your competitors. If you are doing this for a altruistic or philanthropic reason, it's a completely different matter. So really looking at the competitor analysis is a crucial part of your pricing. And don't forget that. That was all.
Thank you, Ian. And I also thought I think a very good example of two companies that were directly competing. If you look at the entertainment sector and video game consoles, comparing Microsoft and Sony and the way they were introducing their products, and traditionally with video game consoles, the business model has always been at the beginning they'll sell their consoles at a loss because they want to attract more customers, they want to increase their user base, and over the life cycle of those devices, by the advancements of technology and being able to make the same device for cheaper, they slightly change their business model, and which has slightly changed in the recent years, and the different pricing strategies that the different companies have, and how they were kind of the messaging around justifying what would be the price for each of these devices. And I think that's a very interesting thought and study to look into if we're looking for some examples of these the things that Ian mentioned here. So And finally, we have the SWT analysis that'll help you really narrow down the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats within your idea. And the example we have here, if I'm not mistaken, this is from introduction on iPhone, and comparing that with the more direct competitor Android, and the different pieces about that. I think that's all we wanted to cover. And before we start the discussion, I wanted to emphasize, because we did receive a couple of emails, people who are concerned about not having technical background compared to other people who are doing the course. Now, we do have all these different levels of knowledge within our group and our cohort. So if you don't have that technical background, that's completely fine. You can still uh, make your project and design and present your final report as the plan for implementation of a project. You don't have to get to that implementation phase and prototyping phase. Well, as engineers, we're definitely interested in that, but that doesn't mean uh, you won't be able to have a successful business plan, custom structure, and that background research for implementing that idea, for being able to pass the unit. So that you don't have to worry about not having that technical knowledge on it.
As I think we've mentioned before, the main purpose, or one of the main purposes of this Micromasters, is to allow people of different backgrounds to be able to communicate well with others. So if you're a business person, then you'll be able to talk, make sense to a software developer or a hardware developer, know what is possible, what's not possible, and deal with them in a meaningful manner. Not that you could possibly develop the entire system yourself, but you'll be able to do the specifications and deal with the technical people correctly. And it's the same for the engineers and programmers. We find it very different to talk to business people, or in particular health professionals, don't we, Savash? They live in a completely different world to engineers, and it does take some change in the mindset to be able to deal with people outside your own discipline. And that is one of the key factors we're looking at in this part of the Micromasters in particular. How do you deal with people outside your own expertise area? And that's why the team's a good thing to be involved in.
A good example of what Ian mentioned is for my own PhD research. At some point, I had to get some data from the hospital, and the data I was going to use, it would have been just numbers coming out of an IMU device, without any names attached to it, without any way to kind of relate that back to a patient. But because of the different mentality and because of the different ways the health professionals look at data, the approval process of me getting access to that information, even if it was uh, uh, completely distant from any names or attached to any particular patient, that was a interesting kind of challenge to keep in mind.
Particularly since it was data from children.
Yeah. All right.
Interesting area. If you're going to go into the health fields with IoT devices, it's a minefield. You've got to be very careful. I would suggest finding a health professional clinician to work with, because there are so many little traps that you've got to be careful of. Different ways of doing things if you're not in the health industry yourself, and a very different mindset. And that probably applies to many other areas too. So, ready for questions, discussion? We really do want to have discussions here. There we go. Simon, go ahead.
Morning, afternoon, evening, all. Just a couple of quick points. Did you say last night's fortnight's presentation went up on the YouTube channel? Because I can't find it.
I did say that. I'm sorry. I've been utterly buried, and I've just remembered I had to do it this morning. So this one and the next one. No, it's not you. I meant to apologise. As I came in this morning, went record. I went, oh, golly gosh, I haven't done the other. My fault completely. Feel free to remind me if you can't find them. To shoot me an email, and I'll make them up. It's this COVID thing is having a pretty dramatic effect on our schedules.
I'm surprised.
Yeah. Sorry about that,
Yeah.
but I will
No,
get one up today.
no, it's cool. And just on that as well, again, I haven't checked this morning, but there was a couple of questions raised in the discussion board over the past few days around the actual video presentation. Some people were saying they may not have the ability to do a video, and would a PowerPoint with audio would be sufficient? I'm not quite sure anyone responded to that yet.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll cover that now. And Sebastian, would you mind popping in at some point today and just answering that? We're happy with however you like to present. So if you want to have yourself singing and dancing and lots of displays and props in the background, good. If you want to have a straight PowerPoint, talking over the top of it, no pictures of you, perfect. All right, we don't mind. This is presenting it in a way that you're comfortable with. We'll be looking at these and giving some feedback on what works and what doesn't. But it really is a case of you being comfortable with what you're presenting, how you're presenting it, and we're looking forward to the content and how well you convince people as per the rubric. So the format's not that important.
Okay, gotcha.
It's not for us if it's really entertaining, because we have to watch them. But
I'll get the cloud shoes out.
That's not the main, not the main point.
Okay, cool. The last one, I think, is probably more of a technical thing we can talk about later on, but just some guidance on energy harvesting and those types of things would help me a little bit. I'm struggling there at the moment.
Yeah.
Not a conversation right now, but yeah.
Yeah. Energy harvesting is probably something we should talk about at some point. Did we have one on that, Sevash, that we were going to do?
I'm not sure we'd have one last year.
Okay, well, maybe that's something we should add. But energy harvesting is a critical thing. We might add it into next fortnight's. We had a really good case of some work in Sri Lanka, and that was tracking elephants. We tried it here in Perth, and it worked really well. We didn't have any elephants around.
Well, apart from one place.
Yeah. No, seriously, the problem was you've got wild elephants in Sri Lanka and they come into the villages and do all kinds of damage, but they're a protected species, so you're not allowed to do anything to them. And the idea was we could put trackers on the elephant, and when they're approaching a village, you send the foresters out to actually move them off and back to where they're meant to be. Of course, the problem is middle of Sri Lanka, developing country, not very good phone coverage, definitely no wireless coverage. You do not want to capture an elephant to change the batteries in its tracking device. That's not a fun job. So we had to have fairly powerful transmitters, which meant high power usage and no real ability to recharge. So they did energy scavenging on it, and it was fairly simple. A magnet inside a coil and a supercap type charger plus the battery for the more consistent energy flow. And as the elephant swayed, the magnet moves in the coil, which is how we generate power, and that's how the whole device was powered. So movement's a good one.
I'm thinking electromagnetic.
Yeah,
that's where I'm thinking I struggle. Yeah.
I didn't want to talk too much about your particular one because of the privacy issues. But again, that's something you can do and can actually be rather illegal. There was cases where people were wrapping the roof of their house in copper wire, picking up the electromagnetic field of the transmission lines that went near their house and stimulating the energy from the power lines, which is basically stealing. But yeah, you can do that. And that's the way things like wireless charging work.
Yes. Yeah.
In fact, that'd be, for you, a really good way to go. Look at the wireless charging chipsets you can get.
Yes. Yeah.
And all you need to do is make up a little coil, and you can actually buy those.
Yep.
And see if the frequency will match what you're intending to do. Quite often they've got a much higher frequency, but you can put a little. Yeah, we can talk about that.
Sure. Okay. Good. Thank you, Ian. Thank you. That's great. That's all me done. I'll now put my hand down.
Yep. And we have Gopal. Yep.
I got a question from what Simon just explained on energy factor. Is there any way the if I'm connecting a sensor for finding a vibration in a motor, for example, a big motor, big equipment, the electromagnetic produced because of the power connection to that motor, is that sufficient enough to power the sensor? Is that possible?
If you choose the right platform, yes. Sebastian, you know, off the top of your head, some low power. So what sort of sensor is it? Is it a vibration sensor or?
Yeah. So my idea is I'm converging physical and the existing process parameters. For example, for a pump, if I can measure the vibration when I do whenever the pump is running on low viscous, high viscous, or slurry, different kind of material into it. So I'm kind of correlating both the data. So now, if I use a vibration sensor, takes the power from the electromagnetic field produced from the motor, that saves a lot of cost because I don't want to run power to the sensor separately. I'm thinking about the MQTT or any kind of technology to transfer the data.
It
So,
depends how often you're transferring. So my suggestion, jump in any time here, is, Sebastian, is you would look at the very, very low power controller to do some processing or condensing of the information you need to transmit. Transmission is going to be the big power usage. What sort of distance do you need to go?
I can fix the edge device like a receiver anywhere nearby because that is not a problem. The problem is on the powering the sensor. That is the problem.
Yeah, it should be a relatively simple problem to solve. I just put a link in the chat. If you have a look there, that's actually a company that does energy scavenging, and they've got a big motor with the energy scavenging and the sensing on it. It should be completely possible if we look for energy scavenging devices. Oh, actually, there's a good one. Yeah. Let me share my screen because if you have a bit of a search around, there's lots of images on how these devices work. But yeah, the main thing is look at a minimal power processor, how often you need to transmit data, because even in the power efficient modes, your wake and sleep setup does take a fair bit of energy, and then your transmission takes another fair whack of energy. And then the distance you need to go is going to be critical on the power usage. So if you're using Bluetooth 5 or BLE 5, you probably get fairly good energy usage, but you're going to be very limited in the distance you can transmit. And it may actually turn out to be worthwhile to increase the infrastructure and to have powered gathering points regularly throughout the installation, so that you only have to transmit that 5 or 10 meters from the sensor, so that can be powered to get to the intermediate node, which then does the MQTT or co-app off to the processing nodes or the edge.
Okay.
But you can get controllers that are in the microamps in running. You can get transmitters that will also transmit short distance at fairly low data rates in the microamps as well. So that means the energy scavenging may, in fact, be enough to power the device.
Thank you.
But send Sebastian or myself an email with what you're planning, and we should be able to get you some further info on that.
Yeah, I'm just sketching out some small architecture. So probably this week or early next week, I will send you the information so that I can express what I actually am thinking about.
Yeah. Well, just having a look at these small vibration sensors and what sort of voltage the working voltage is. Seems like we can find 3.3 to 5 volt working devices. I think an interesting kind of energy scavenging project we're currently working on is we are working on monitoring of water leakage in water mains, and we were looking into whether we wanted to have a flow meter there. So we were looking to see if we could use the flow of the water itself to power up some bits and pieces of the controller we're building here. So another example, so the flow of water turning a turbine or something to generate power. But yeah, send us the information and we'll look into it further for you once we have a bit more detail about what exactly you're doing.
Sure. I'd also have a look at the piezo energy scavenging, see if that's going to give you enough current.
Any more questions, anyone? I think next week we are covering an introduction to sensors in general, and the types of sensors and what are the typical information you would need for capturing data from a sensor. Some solutions, some suggestions on where you can get information and specific technical details for devices and small electronics. So for the
So let's try and add some energy scavenging info in there. I found a couple of good sites just then that should show us different methods, the piezo, the electromagnetic. Make sure we cover something on electromagnetic scavenging.
Okay.
We might talk a bit about the flow energy scavenging. What we're planning there with the water flow.
Sure.
We can just add that in. Do you want to go back to your screen, show the IP Australia and the patent website?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. What do I have open here? What might help is I actually let me copy the links and send them through as well. Okay, so I'll send them in the chat first. This is the IP Australia one.
They're in the edX.
Oh, they're there? Okay.
I think so, but it'll be
just in case. Yeah. Chrome. Right, so this one is the Australia one. So I think this is where you would put the keyword.
If you put energy scavenging in there, since we're on that subject.
Oh, now everyone's going to see my spelling. How do you spell scavenging?
SCAV.
SCA.
Grammarly is your friend, Sash.
Absolutely. I can't. My spelling has always been atrocious.
Oh my God, this is not how you spell scavenging.
Isn't it? Well, is it a speller in the house?
Energy harvesting, I could look for
try
it.
harvesting. Yeah, energy harvesting sounds good. Amazing how you come up with words you can spell instead of the words that are correct.
Exactly. I found one result.
It's the history of Australian innovation, so it's well, let's pick something else.
And then this one. Yeah. Oh, and there are even suggestions there. So interestingly enough, there aren't that many patents in this specific topic. Are there anything for IMUs? Yeah, definitely. So IMUs as an example of devices, different ways of different patents here.
Now, if you actually have a look at one,
let's do
colours in there.
That one, for example.
People realise, but the patent system was actually developed to allow people to share their ideas. It was meant to be somewhere you could put your ideas up safely. People could then take your idea rather than trying to reinvent everything and get ideas from your patent and then reuse it. with the idea that if you develop something, you still get rewarded for it through the licensing, but other people could actually find it and use the developments you came up with. It hasn't turned out to be that. Now, patent law is one of my bugbears, actually. Patents are used to gouge or troll people for income. There's companies out there, I think people are aware, that just go around buying up patents with the idea they can use them to sue other people. And that's not exactly what it was intended to do. There was a great company for that. Anyone here remember SCO Unix? The cruise organisation. They were
Oh yes.
big.
Oh yes.
Yes, they do. Yep.
And all they ended up being was a company that was suing all the Linux people, saying they had stolen Unix code base, and basically put themselves out of business doing it. I'm not sure if they still exist.
I haven't heard of them in years, so.
Okay, have we got any other questions? Well, on our development so far, we've got a couple of people that have asked further information. We'll speak to you separately. We are here to help, so please talk to us.
Anyone who's starting to work on a prototype, have you narrowed down what sort of platform you're going to be using in terms of, say, an Arduino, Raspberry Pi, 32, different sensors?
One thing I'll remind everyone of, the Cisco material in Python, networking, etc. If you haven't still got access to that and you would like it, just let us know and we'll add you into the latest classes. So you can go back and use that as reference material or complete the courses if you didn't. So just let us know if you want those.
Hey, quick question on open sources. So there are a lot of open source technologies available, like in the market. Like if I search for an edge computing, I can directly get some software from open source and install it on my edge device. Is that a right way of doing it, or I don't know?
That's a really good area. Yes, it's a great way of doing it, but be aware of the different forms of open source. If you take something that's licensed, for example, and I might yield to Hannes or Valerie because they're more of the software people. So jump in, guys, if I'm saying something wrong. If you take something from GPL, the GNU public license, it's actually copyleft, and that prevents you from being able to copyright or protect anything you develop based on that code base. So you take the edge algorithm for, I don't know, processing vibration. Any modification you do to that and using your device must also be released under the GPL, right? Which means anyone can copy it and reuse it. Now, that may not be an issue. If it is an issue, you've got to look for software with a different open source license. Hannes, Val, do you know a better one for that? Would it be the Apache or
MIT, possibly? I think there's a license called the MIT license, which is very liberal in how you use it. There's a huge range of licenses. The GPL is not the only one. So in general, the only thing that you can really do is actually check the licenses, and most of the license systems have a summary as well, even if it's from a separate site, that should tell you what you can and can't do, which is useful.
And some of them are variable, like the Creative Commons. They have different levels of protection in there. Yeah, use open source where you can. That's a very good point, Val. Val typed in a number of different licenses involved. Otherwise, it would get really, really complex.
Also, Valerie posted an interesting link in the chat. It's a patent for footwear energy harvesting system. So take a look at that as an example.
What does it use? Oh, footwear. Yeah, I've seen some of those. Yeah. Gas. Can anyone pick the problem with this one? As it wears out, you get leaks in the gas chamber. Another area that we've got to think of, which we don't really cover a great deal in this course, is the long-term life of product and how it will wear out and when it's planned to wear out. That planned obsolescence is a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing in that if you know how long your device is meant to last, you can let people know up front, such as the mean time between failure figures that are normally given in industrial circumstances, and also know when people are going to repurchase your devices, so you can actually plan for that. Does anyone know how that planned obsolescence came about? It's a very interesting story, if you're interested in that sort of thing. It actually came from light bulbs, Osram light bulbs. The original Edison light bulb lasted basically forever. And Osram saw this as a really, really bad thing because they will never sell another light bulb. So they designed their light bulbs to fail after, I can't remember what it was. It was a fixed amount of time and not very long. They then went into an arrangement with all other light bulb manufacturers so that nobody's light bulb would last longer than this period of time. So it just didn't look like Osram were bad ones. And that got them into a spot of bother with the US government. But that's really one of the first classic cases of planned obsolescence where they design something to fail after a certain amount of time so that they can sell another one.
Like Apple cables, because they're designed to disintegrate when you look at them for more than a year.
Yeah, come on. Don't be nasty.
It's too early for that, Savash.
Or we could talk about Acer computers that are designed to fail as soon as you take them out of the box.
True. Right. Yes.
An interesting quote from yeah, no, Valor. That's why I've switched to Windows and Android. An interesting quote from Hannes. When we speak of free software, we're referring to freedom, not the price of it being free.
Yes, very good. Free as in beer, or not free as in beer. You want to expand on that a little, Hannes?
The article I linked there explains the idea behind the GPL license and some of the misconceptions with it, and goes into detail on some of the things that you can and can't do when using a GPL license product and how it applies to other people who make products better than your product, etc. So they specifically say, yeah, but you can definitely go and sell it, but you need to, let other people use things as well, sort of. So yeah.
Other people can then go and modify it for their own purpose. Yeah, I don't think there's anything in the GPL that stops you from selling it. In fact, I'm sure there's not. The good old days with the early days of Linux, when the distributions came out on CDs, people would sell the CD. They're not selling the software, they're selling the CD, which contains the software. So there's no problem with that. Red Hat changed from a open source free platform to a user pays platform. But again, they weren't selling Red Hat Linux, they were selling support for Red Hat Linux. So there are ways around the open source costing model that are completely legitimate, and people do buy it. And support is one of the big things. That idea that you sell a device at a very low cost. Sebastian was using the example of consoles. I think Microsoft sold all of their Xboxes that are lost in the beginning. It's there so that you get the user base out there, you become the popular one, and you make your money on other parts such as support, software, selling new games. If you look at the list price of cars, they're a great example of this. Dealers make almost nothing on selling you a new car. Fortune on the servicing and the bonuses they get back for meeting certain volume amounts on the vehicles. And I think the car manufacturers are doing that so that they see the population is a popular car. So if you've got in Australia, Holden Commodore, which doesn't exist anymore, it's a very popular car, so you feel safe going out and buying a Holden Commodore. Except we don't make cars anymore in this country. My Toyota Camry is more Australian than the Holden. Most of it was manufactured in Australia, whereas most of the Holdens were made overseas. Sorry. We have no hands up. Anyone got anything of interest they would like to raise? Problems?
At the moment, I'm just focusing on my presentation, and then I'll tackle the fun stuff next week.
If you really want to use a nice presentation package, Camtasia's out there, and you can get a free 30-day trial. It's a really nice package. A bit pricey just for a one-off, but that's what we use to produce all the videos that we make for this course and others. But that's a really nice one. But generally, there's lots of free screen capture packages. So if you're just going to use a voice over PowerPoint, then lots of free recorders out there. I think PowerPoint even does it inbuilt now. No need to go to huge expense on it. We look forward to seeing those videos. They're always very entertaining. Well, if there's nothing else, I'll hang around for a bit if anyone wants to chat. I'll stop recording. But carry on. We shall speak to you all in another couple of weeks. But those who have questions on energy scavenging, etc., that we've talked about, get in contact separately. Send us an email, and we'll have a bit of a talk about what we can do there. Scavenging stuff into next fortnight's talk as well.
That's great.
Have a good day or good night or whatever you're having. Carry on, and don't hesitate to contact us. Just send an email through that IoT Capstone email and follow it up if you don't get an answer within a couple of days.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Ian, just one question quickly. In terms of submissions, do I just submit straight to
straight to us?
Yep. Okay.
Everything, if you are doing something that is commercially sensitive, everything just comes directly to Sebastian, myself, and nobody else. Yeah.
Capstone here. Great. Okay. Thanks, guys. Have a great day. Stay warm.
Yeah, try to.
See you later.
Don't breathe the air.